The Boston Tea Party, held on December 16, 1773, was a pivotal protest in American history. It arose from growing resentment among American colonists against British taxation without representation, particularly the Tea Act, which granted the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales. To oppose the perceived injustice, members of the Sons of Liberty, disguised as Mohawk Indians, boarded ships in Boston Harbor and tossed 340 chests of tea into the water. Benjamin Woods Labour's The Boston Tea Party says the 3 ships contained 240 chests of Bowie, 15 of Congou, 10 of Souchong, those were all black teas, 60 of Congou, and 15 of Hyson, which are the green teas. This act of defiance escalated tensions between Britain and the colonies, leading to the Revolutionary War. So in this tea tasting, I am choosing to use a control tea along with the tea from the Boston Tea Party Museum, which I got from Mark T. Wendell and also my own personal collection. So we're going to try the 2 green teas first. The first one being the Hyson tea, which is a light and sweet green tea. When I was doing research for this video, I had a hard time finding a lot of these teas. A lot of these teas really aren't in production anymore, except for Lapsang Souchong. I was able to find that a little bit more easily. So the first thing I noticed with the Hyson teas is that the Mark T. Wendell was just like a little bit brighter. Like it had a little bit more like lushness to it versus the one from the museum. It had just a little bit more of a duller color, I found. But they were pretty similar, honestly. When it comes to tea tastings, you want to try and keep your variables as like consistent as possible. So we're going to be measuring out 2 grams of tea per serving. And this is a 6-ounce tasting cup. The French and Indian War, which lasted from 1754 to 1763, played a key role in setting the stage for the Boston Tea Party. The war left Britain with massive debt, promoting the British government to impose new taxes on the American colonies to help cover the costs. Laws like the Sugar Act, Stamp Act, and Townshend Acts were introduced, fueling colonial resentment toward taxation without representation. The Tea Act of 1773, which directly led to the Boston Tea Party, was part of this broader effort to raise revenue. By restricting colonial trade and favoring British interests, these measures deepened tensions, making the Boston Tea Party a response not only to the Tea Act, but to the broader legacy of British policies following the French and Indian War. The Boston Tea Party provoked harsh British retaliation, including the Intolerable Acts, which further alienated the colonies and set the stage for the Revolutionary War. Ultimately, the Boston Tea Party marked a turning point in the struggle for American independence and became an enduring symbol of the fight for freedom and self-governance. Now looking at the wet leaves of the Hyson teas, the leaves look very similar. The Hyson from Mark T. Wendell looks a little fuller and maybe a little bit greener. But yeah, this is what we're looking at. Okay, so first we're going to try the tea from the museum. Already from the brewing, it looks like there's more sediment at the bottom of the tea, like the tea leaves themselves are more broken. And also the liquor itself looks a little duller. And I think part of that is my theory is that it's probably been sitting in a museum for a while, so it isn't going to be as fresh. Ooh, that's kind of nice actually. Yeah, there's still like a nice smokiness to it, actually. That would make for a really good iced green tea. But yeah, it's not like too astringent. It is pretty mellow, I would say. Now we'll go to the Mark T. Wendell comparison. They're very similar. It's just like a hair more complex. I think because it might be a little fresher, there's more like floral tones to it, which I really love in a green tea. I love it when there's kind of like some orchid, some honeysuckle. I feel like the Hyson tea from the museum reminds me more of like a gunpowder, like smoked green tea. That's still really lovely. I can see why like people would drink this. So in starting a tea tasting, it's very important to go from lightest to darkest because you don't want to blow out your palate. So going back to the Hyson tea, I found a site where I did a lot of research for information for this video, and it stated that 1/3 of the tea exported from China in the 18th century was green tea, with spring-picked Hyson being one of the favorites. The first tea plucked in the spring is always the finest, which the Chinese designated Yuxian, or before the rains tea. The English traders who bought the tea in China thought that the Mandarin name of the tea sounded like the name of a wealthy East India Company director in London named Philip Hyson, and forevermore, the young spring tea took on Mr. Hyson's more pronounceable moniker. Hyson was a favorite tea of both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Moving back to the Congou tea, this green tea was picked later in the season and the leaves were a bit larger. It tended to spoil sooner than other teas and was not widely known in the colonies. It was only included in the ill-fated shipment because the East India Company had quite a bit of stock that needed to be liquidated before it became undrinkable. I'm assuming there was probably more of like a pan firing that happened with with both of them. But the curled green tea, there's like more hand rolling involved, so it's a little bit more, I feel like the leaves get more concentrated when they're hand rolled. So I'm expecting this to have a little bit more punch to it, but we'll see. This tea is very similar to the Hyson. It does kind of have like a smokiness to it. I would say it's a little bit more astringent than the Hyson. The Hyson was a little bit more mellow and refreshing. This one is like just a little bit more bitter. It kind of like lingers on the palate a little bit longer, I feel like. I know technically you're supposed to use a spoon, so then you can like slurp it properly and it aerates and you get the gas molecules, so then it opens up the aroma of the tea. It is so much harder for me to use a spoon, at least right now. I'd rather just sip out of the cup itself, because I feel like that opened up some sweeter tones to the tea. I feel like I got some more like maybe a plum tone came through. Like it just got like really fruity on that sip. Yeah, kind of like a really rich, ripe stone fruit. Not like a peach, like a darker one, like a plum or a prune or something. It's sad I don't have anything to compare it to, but for what it is, I'm very much enjoying it. All right, on to the next one. According to the site where I did my research, 70% of tea imported by the East India Company was well-made Congou black tea. It brewed a deep, transparent red liquor with a strong, pleasant, bitter flavor. The addition of milk surely added to the enjoyment of the beverage. Now, when I was trying to find a control for this tasting, the Congou tea from Mark T. Wendell is a blend and not a single origin, which I'm now assuming that is the case also with the museum tea. The Mark T. Wendell says that it's crafted in the traditional English breakfast style with Darjeeling, Assam, Sri Lanka, as well as a select rare teas from China's famed Yunnan and Anhui provinces. Looking back, I think I enjoyed this tea the most. It was just like a really nice, like English breakfast black tea. And this is something I could see myself coming back to on a daily basis. Come up. There we go. Might take a minute, but we get there. Looking at these teas, they look so similar. There is maybe a little bit more breakage in the museum tea, but honestly, it was like really hard to tell the difference. And that's the point of having controls like this, is so then you're able to have something to compare what this thing is supposed to look like versus the only looking at the thing that you're seeing right now. I did find that the
Mark T. Wendell had a little bit more redness to it, had a little bit more vibrancy to it, kind of similar to how the Hyson tea was compared.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I gotta turn my little Pikachu around. The tea breakage is pretty similar, I would say. What's surprising to me actually, because I thought that the Mark Wendell tea was a little bit more like the full leaf versus the museum. The museum tea leaves definitely were like smaller, a little darker. So yeah, let's go ahead and give it a taste. We'll try the museum first. There's definitely kind of like, it's like an orange spice kind of profile. It's a really, really nice blend of black teas. Yeah, because you can definitely get like, there's probably some Sri Lankan orange pekoe in there. There's probably a little bit of Assam in there, along with probably some like Chinese black teas as well. Yeah, that's really nice. I can see why that would be a very popular tea. I don't think it was the one, let me see. There were 15 chests destroyed. I think the next one is the most. Yeah, there were 240 chests of the next one, of the Bowie tea. This, I think, is considered more of a highbrow tea. Like, it was probably more expensive too. I could see why. It's just very well balanced as a tea. And I have already had the Mark Wendell, like, blend of the Congou tea. I feel like there's more Assam varietal in the Mark Wendell. Assam is, that region produces just very brisk, like robust tea leaves. And it always leaves like a very specific, bitter, astringent profile on my tongue. And it's just very like, it's a very specific identifier where I'm like, ah, yes, that is Assam. But I feel like the museum Congou tea has more like a balanced blend. Like I think there's probably some Assam in there, but I'm getting more probably like a Wuyi black tea along with some Sri Lankan black tea, maybe some Indonesian black tea as well. Like I feel like the blend is more nuanced than with the Mark Wendell. I like the Mark Wendell a lot. I'm a big fan of Assam tea, but it is more predominant in that one. Now we're getting into the smoky teas.
So Bowie tea was the bulk of what Westerners consumed. Some pronounce it Bowie. It was a corrupted name for the Wuyi Mountains south of Shanghai. But the tea was so popular it became a slang word for tea in general.
Oh, sorry, it's so steamy in here.
The tea was described as being frequently smoky, but always unpleasant.
Ooh. I don't think that's lightly smoked. I think that is just smoked.
It was considered that the superior form of Bowie or Bowie tea was Congou tea.
Here's the tea. I was going to compare this Bowie tea with the Wuyi Shan black tea, I guess. Because in my amateur Googling, whenever I looked up Bowie tea, Wuyi would come up, which Wuyi is a region in China that produces so many different kinds of teas. Lapsang Suzhong is very popular, which is more of what this smells like. To be honest, I kind of forgot if I was comparing the Wuyi Shan to the Bowie or the Huqua. I kind of want to make a Hok Tua joke, but the Huqua tea with the Bowie tea. So I'm just gonna like open this and we're gonna smell it and see like where we're gonna go with comparing teas here, because I kind of want to just compare the Bowie tea with the Suzhong tea that's also in the kit. It's very smoky because I already have Lapsang Suzhong. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. Oh well, that happens sometimes, but I think for fun, we'll just compare it with this.
So now with these teas, I knew what I was about to get into. Like, smoky teas are not my favorite.
Got too excited. I was trying to show off.
They tend to be more one-noted to me because the smoke is so prominent. So I was kind of hoping that with the Bowie tea being lightly smoked, that maybe some other aromatics or compounds will come forward.
This is what we're working with. This is the Bowie Museum tea. These are the leaves. And then this is the Hukwa. They kind of smell a little different. The first thing I'm thinking about is if they smoked these with different like woods or embers. Because Lapsang Souchong, if memory serves, is smoked specifically with pine. And I don't feel like, specifically from the Hukwa, I'm getting pine. I could be wrong. But they look very similar. The museum tea is still like there's more broken leaves I find in the bottom of the cup versus the Mark Wendell. Let's see what we find. I feel like that's just like a Lapsang Souchong. It does feel milder. So the labeling was correct. It feels like it's not as abrasive as a Lapsang Souchong. I feel like I could still drink that in the morning and have it not be so like being smoked out like by a campfire. Okay, let's see here. I'm like shaking. I can't like hold a spoon apparently. That one's kind of reminding me now more of a traditional Lapsang Souchong. Like that pine is really coming forward, pine ember. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not like disappointed by any means. I think it's still a great tea. I think I would love to try teas that are smoked with other embers besides pine. These are both pine. This one's just a little bit lighter, the museum tea. This one's more approachable, for sure. And this is the tea that the most chests were dumped into the Hudson Bay. This was the most. And I could probably see why this one was really popular because this is just a working theory. If people are already smoking a lot of tobacco and out of pipes, then probably they're already drawn to like smoky aesthetics. But I feel like I might be onto something with like people already were smoking and so they maybe wanted or enjoyed a smoked tea to go along with their smoking experience. I don't feel like I need to compare the Souchong. I think I'm just gonna clean out one of these. I'm gonna clean out the Bowie tea and then just compare the Hukwa with the Lapsang Souchong and see how similar they are. Because the Hukwa is very much just a Lapsang Souchong tea,
So, according to the article I found, Souchong is a classic black tea from the Wuyi Mountains of Fujian province, which has a very distinctive smoky aroma. The original term Souchong means small leaf variety and refers to a family of tea cultivars that have existed in this famous tea-growing region of Fujian since 1717. The Souchong teas drunk by early colonialists would have had a very slight smoky aroma, which the tea leaves picked up during the drying process. Most of today's Souchong exports are intentionally smoked with smoldering pine wood and are called Lapsang Souchong.
The fifth and final. Now obviously they're gonna like come across differently because the Hukwa has been sitting out for a little bit. These look exactly the same. Pretty much exactly the same. There is a little bit more broken leaf in the bottom of the Hukwa, but liquor-wise, they look exactly the same. Let's see, how hot is this still? Okay, that's cooled down significantly. I feel like with it cooling down, it has also brought forward more of that, the smokiness is coming forward even more. I can't hold a spoon to save my life. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Yeah, it's a Lapsang Souchong. It is a smoky black tea. And I would be very curious to do more research on why like Lapsang Souchong was popular with Americans and with the British, because I don't feel like I hear, especially now, people talking about like Lapsang Souchong as like a regular thing that tea drinkers drink. If these were like the 5 big teas, I would have imagined that maybe an oolong would have been more popular because it's more approachable versus like a really smoky black tea. And this kind of goes back to my theory of maybe smoking was just more popular and people liked the smell of smoke more and they really enjoyed that with their teas. Maybe. Could be wrong. It is still like, it's the souchong from the museum is a very well done souchong, I will say.
At this point in the video, I was trying to figure out my concluding thoughts on this experiment because as I am continuing to learn more about tea, the more you realize the history of tea is very complicated. It is full of colonialism, of, to be honest, like oppression and countries conquering other countries and using tea as a commodity for wars. And it's just very contested. I think the biggest takeaway from this experience was that doing stuff like this makes history feel more real. It gives people more dimensions and it helps us remember that these things actually happened and existed. And it's something that we shouldn't just put on a shelf and forget about.